Hello and welcome to the Lunchtime Livestream. It is good to be on here this morning. So glad to see everybody. We are going to have a really fun conversation today because Dave's message this past week was just on top of it. It was phenomenal. And so we're going to have a lot of fun chatting about this today. We got a few people already live now and watching. Real quick, my name is John Kelly. I'm one of the ministers here. I'm the minister of engagement at Catalyst. Long story short, I do pretty much all of our online ministry, as well as trying to get people connected into the church, especially those of you who are not here in Nicholasville or the Lexington area and want to get connected to the church from a distance. I'm your guy. A few quick things real quick. We've got community group sign-up starting right now. You can sign up online or in person on Sunday. You just need to contact David Kibler for more info on that. Also coming up real soon, we're going to be kicking off our marriage ministry with a seminar called Indestructible Marriage. It's going to be Saturday, February 13th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There will be childcare for that. You can find out everything about that online at catalystchristian.net to get more info about that. So before we get going here, I want to go ahead and bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Robert Harlemert. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. So I heard you hurt your back last week.
Yeah, I did. I have a tendency to throw out my back a couple times a year. It seems like this one wasn't too bad. Like the last one, I couldn't like breathe. It felt like for a while.
Yeah,
but this one was just like.
I was gonna say it's got to be hard when you have to carry the church on your back like that.
Yeah, that's what it was.
With me and Dave, working with me and Dave, carrying us the whole time. I mean, that makes it hard, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. No, my son just twisted a weird way when I picked him up, and
it was
just kind of awkward. I couldn't stand for very long. It was like 45 minutes, and I had to go just rest it for a little bit. So it was minor compared to like throwing out backs, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, I would say so, man. That's never fun at all.
No. Throwing your back is not good. Don't do it.
So we are in the midst of a series called The Countercultural Marriage here at Catalyst right now. And Dave's sermon this past week, as far as from an application standpoint, may have been one of his best sermons ever.
Yeah, I would say so.
I'm not just saying it.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I think he really hit some notes that I think a lot of us need to hear. And even if we're not failing in this area or having struggles in this area, it's always good to be reminded of this stuff so that we don't fall into these different things. I do want to make a quick evaluation of something real quick. Can I see your sweatshirt real quick?
Yep.
What does that say on it? Oh, it says Ohio State.
It has Ohio State, and it has Brutus, the Buckeye.
Oh, nice.
In the bottom.
Nice.
There he is.
That's awesome that you're wearing that today. I've got my OHIO shirt on.
Yeah.
And I've got my Ohio State hat on. Did you know? Did you know that Ohio State is ranked 13th in the country right now in basketball?
Yes, I did know that.
We just got done. I mean, we got beat in the national championship game, but we went to the national championship game in football.
Yeah.
We crushed Clemson.
Yes.
Yes. Crushed them. And then of course, we had to play Alabama. But then now we're ranked number 13 in the. Oh, here's my wife. I love her. OHIO. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Where's Kentucky ranked right now?
Man, I don't know. I didn't see them on the top 25. Were they on there?
It might be a misprint. Maybe we're just missing something because I didn't see them when I was looking at it the other day. So who knows? I guess we'll just have to wait and see if they reprint it and if they get him in there. We'll see what happens. But today's sermon, this week's sermon was entitled "How to Argue Without Destroying Your Home," which I want to say point blank, that is a fantastic title for a sermon.
Yes.
Fantastic title for a sermon.
That's going to get a lot of people wanting to figure out that answer. Mm-hmm. That's one of those, like when you're on YouTube, it's like how to fix your car in 30 seconds, Yeah,
like
I want to know how to do that.
So Another thing I really like was his main thing for this week, because Dave decided to go Old English on us. He went straight King James English. Thou shalt argue with thy spouse as thou would have thy spouse argue with thee.
Yeah.
What did you think about that main thing, man? I always ask you this every week. What do you think about the
As
main
soon as
thing?
he said it, I was like, how in the world am I supposed to remember that? That's immediately what I thought of. Because the main thing's supposed to be like we're supposed to remember it. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't. That went over my head. I don't know idea.
Well, I think Philippians 2:3-4 best explains it. So
Yeah.
in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you.
Yeah.
This sums up the law and the prophets. Basically, treat others the way you'd want to be treated. And
Yeah.
so while we've got people starting to log in now and get in here, I want to ask the question, have you caught yourself lashing out at your spouse or other loved ones, and what was the outcome? So go ahead and share some of those stories with us. I would love to know just things like that you've done over the years. I know there's one. I can honestly say I've never screamed or yelled at Rhea. I have not done that to her. My son, that might be a different story. That there's something about the age of 2 with a toddler
Oh, yeah.
that I like to call it the button pushing age, because somehow that little human being who maybe weighs 30 pounds, if that, soaking wet, knows where your aggravation button is. And it's like they sit there staring at it and just do this the whole day. That's just what they do. And I have to say, there have been times where I've had to like pull myself back and hug on my little boy and feel bad because I just yelled at him for something, because
Yeah.
the thing is, he pushes my buttons. He's found 3 or 4 of Rhea's, and he's sitting here doing this all day.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
This is what he's doing with Rhea. You know, he's pushing every button. And it's just been crazy. So go ahead and share some stories, guys. Let us know kind of what's happened when you've lashed out, and kind of the outcome of that. First thing I want to talk about is something Dave handled very well, because this is something, when you bring it up, a lot of times it can be very controversial. It can be taken the wrong way and out of context and turned into a very combative topic. And that's the idea that men and women communicate differently. Dave made the statement that men typically respond with logic, women typically respond with emotion.
Yep.
Now, this wasn't making the statement that men are cold and don't love, and it doesn't mean that women are overly emotional all the time. That's not what this is saying. It's actually quite different than that. It's basically saying the initial reaction of a man is, how do I fix the problem? And the initial reaction of the female is, what's the root of the problem? And what can we do to ease that part of it? Neither one is wrong.
Correct.
They're just different.
What
are your thoughts?
Both of them.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on all this?
I agree. I agree with that. That I loved his example of it. He said if your kid ever gets into a fight at school, the husband says, "Well, don't do that again," and the wife says, "Is he okay?" And I started laughing immediately, because my parents are like that. Like immediately, like I just picture, like my mom and my dad were like the exact picture of what Dave was describing with that. Where my mom still to this day is very like, everyone just needs to be nice, and my dad's like, that people just need to do this. And you see like this heart thing with contrasting with like tangible logic is wonderful, and you need both. Like they're both right.
You do. Yeah.
And but it's funny how I'm sure not every man and every woman is like this, but I fit in this category, these two contrasting things, very much so.
It's funny you say that. Again, I go back to my 2-year-old. One thing about 2-year-old boys is they are clumsy as all get out. My son trips over his shadow.
Yep.
I mean, he's that way. And he's always falling all over the house, always falling all over the house. And I'm always trying really hard to have a good heart and love my son and be like, "Are you okay?" But usually I'll see him fall, take a good look at him and be like, "You're good." Rhea, on the other hand, will pick him up, hold him, hug him. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" And I'm the guy sitting over here going, "He's fine. Just rub some dirt on it and move on," you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just, it really is a difference between men and women. There's a huge difference there.
I agree.
And of course, Rhea just want to make sure she said that he comes by his clumsiness honestly. If you know my wife, she is prone to tripping and falling and doing all kinds of fun things. But yeah, so let me ask the question: how have you guys seen this communication difference lived out in your marriages? How have you seen the way you and your spouse react to things differently? What are some things that you see in this? Because I'm not going to say all marriages are like this, but there are a lot of marriages that they see this. They get in a situation and they realize that I think this way, he thinks that way, or I think this way and she thinks that way. So what are the ways that you guys have seen this happen in your lives? Rob, I want to go back to something we talked about last week, and that's always assume the best.
Yes.
Always assume the best. Now, the reason I put that up there is because it's so easy in marriage to assume one is thinking something or planning something without actually knowing. I mean, what do you agree with that? What do you think about that? Have you seen that before?
Yeah, all the time. I mention this quite often on the stream. I say if you live a life assuming, you're probably going to live a miserable life.
Yeah.
And if you're going to assume, so if you decide that you're going to assume in your life, you might as well assume the best. So you're not overly miserable all the time, because sometimes it might actually work out and they were going to do the best thing, and then it's happy. But yeah, that's so true, because a lot of people just immediately go to the negative, which is sad. But I think we're told to do that, I think, from a young age, or we watch people do that at a young age. So we just think that's what you're supposed to do. You're always almost like expect the worst type of thing, where the worst happens 6% of the time probably in your life. That's what I view it as. What about you, John?
I think a lot of it it's always going to come down to communication breakdown. Nice cup. It's always going to come down to a breakdown in communication. If there's one thing that I learned from my dad was a minister, and him and my mom, they got into arguments at times. But rarely did it ever escalate and get huge. But one of the things he always told me is, he said, it's better to be direct and honest and loving than to beat around the bush. He's like, because you don't want to give room for doubt and you don't want to give room for assumption. And so it's just better to be direct, honest, and loving. And that loving part's important, because you can be direct and honest and it can be brutal. And that's not necessarily the route you want to go, but you definitely don't want to beat around the bush.
Yeah.
And Dave kind of talks about this a little bit. He talked about the communication destroyers. Talked about all three of these: withdrawing, escalation, and belittling. And so I kind of want to take some time and kind of chat through each of these, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
But withdrawing, the idea that when one comes at the other, and instead of engaging in a conversation, they just kind of shrink back and walk away. Have you seen this? Is this something you've experienced? Do you think there's a reason why this happens quite a bit, especially with men? It seems like men do this an awful lot. Why is this something that happens?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I've done this before in relationships or something. Nobody likes to have hard conversations. Nobody's like, I can't wait today to have a hard conversation with this. It's going to be the best thing in the world. It's going to be the peak of my day. And a lot of people like to avoid hard conversations because they don't want to go through it. They don't realize that when you go through hard situations with relationships or with your spouse, it makes you better as a couple, because you have a better understanding about that certain situation in your life. But for some reason, men especially will withdraw from it. Probably with the understanding that if you ignore it, it will go away.
Which never works.
Which
ever.
Which doesn't work. It's like ignoring water coming into your house. It's like,
Yes.
it'll dry. It's fine. Nothing's going to happen. But you don't realize that there's a lot of damage and there's probably healing that needs to be involved when it comes to that. So withdrawing it's never good. Now one thing that Dave said, which was good, is, and I'd like to bring it up with withdrawing. It's okay to remove yourself for a little bit. If you're heated and you feel like you can't think in a loving and rational way, you probably should remove yourself for a second, calm yourself down, and then put yourself back into a successful situation rather than just getting frustrated.
Yeah.
I really like that.
I think that sometimes you need a cooling down period.
Yes.
But I think if you need a cooling down period, you need to communicate that's what you need and not just walk away.
That's very true.
I can't emphasize enough the importance of communicating what is going on. You have to communicate. This idea of withdrawing, are you withdrawing just because you don't want to talk about it? That's probably not good. But if you're withdrawing for a moment to gather yourself, collect your thoughts, and say something intelligent, then look at your spouse and say, listen, I'm starting to get upset. Give me a few minutes. Let me calm down and let you calm down.
Yep.
And then let's talk. One, that gets rid of the assumption that you're just avoiding. And then two, it really does allow you to calm down.
Yeah.
I think Dave said if the male heart rate gets above 100, that's about the point where he becomes, I don't want to say out of control, but more or less temper led.
Yeah.
Once you get above that 100 heartbeat,
guys can't think logically most likely after you reach 100 beats per minute.
Yeah, that's true. He also mentioned, we didn't mention this earlier, but he mentioned that women have a daily word allotment of about 20,000 words, and men have about 8,000. And the only reason I bring that up is because Julio Roman is on here, and he said, so I went to talk to Jess last night in bed, and she says my 8,000 words are done. And he also said I have a lot more words of the 20,000 opposite of what Dave said. He says it's true. If anyone knows Jess, she doesn't talk much. And he's right about that. And honestly, that would probably be me and Rhea. I definitely, and mostly because when I work during the day, a lot of times, like right now, especially, I'm in a garage. For those of you knowing, this is not real brick behind me. Okay. This is fake brick so that you don't see my messy garage because I'm working in my garage. Messed up my knee. I'm not working at the office. And yeah, so I'm here. So I don't have any words to use during the day. I'm mostly just sitting by myself, not talking. And when Rhea gets home, she's on the phone the entire day. And so when she gets home and I want to talk, she's kind of like, no. Just absolutely no. Ringo says, I was waiting to hear a joke about 20,000 and 8,000. The man would ask, what did you just say? And then April Price, she said she's more like Jessica too. She's not a big words person. Yeah. So, but back to the communication destroyers. The next one was escalation. I think it's really easy to take a situation and instead of putting out the fire, it's real easy to feed it. Especially nowadays, because it feels like, especially with social media and the news and everything else that's going on, the heavily political nature of everything right now, that everybody's looking to be angry. So when they get into a conversation and something doesn't go the way they think it should, it's real easy just to lose your mind and take it to the next level. What are some ways that people do this, Rob? escalate conversations?
Yeah, I immediately thought of the next thing we were going to talk about, but uh, disagree with that person, cut them off from talking, having a response before they finish, or you already have a response before they finish their thought, and then you say what you're going to say, and they realize you weren't actually listening to what they were saying. I mean, there's a billion different ways that you can just keep on tossing wood on this small fire to make it into a huge brush bonfire
Yeah.
real quick. It's like not just putting wood, you're putting gasoline on it, and it just ignites at a rapid pace.
Yeah. I always come back to the two phrases, you always and you never.
Yeah.
Using those two phrases can escalate an argument so fast. You never do this, you never take care of
Yeah.
this, you never help with
Point.
this, or you always try and get out of this, or you always do what you want to do, or those two statements, you always and you never,
Yeah.
are some of the biggest escalators that
Yeah.
you can have in a conversation. And I know when Rhea and I have had conversations about things in the past, and we've argued about things before. I can honestly say I'm pretty blessed we don't do a lot of arguing, because she just knows I'm a dummy and she puts up with it. But when we have disagreed on things, we know very well you do not say you always and you never. We just
Yes.
avoid those two phrases like they're the plague.
Yeah, we try, whenever we communicate, we try to say, and we'll correct each other if we're in a heated, like a topic that involves frustration. It's like, we need to stop saying you, we need to say we.
Yeah.
Because we are a team, and nobody is expected to do anything. We're taking care of this house together. It's not you do this and you do this. It's how can we do this, or how can we put this in place so that we are successful. Now that might involve somebody doing something by themselves, but it has to be a we thing. Like, we are failing at this.
Right.
We are
Right.
not communicating in this way. We need to fix this.
You know, laying the fault all on one person or the other is going to escalate it beyond what it
Yeah.
needs to be.
Yeah.
Denise Sanford, Rhea's Aunt Denise, my Aunt Denise, who's younger than me, telling you are acting like, and she put fill in the blank person. For me, it's my mom, and that's a good one, because that's a button pusher. That's a
Ooh.
button pusher for a lot of people. You know, the idea that, well, now you look at you don't like how this person acts. Well, you're acting like them right now. You know, wow, that that won't put out any fires. That's going to be like gasoline on the fire, using that kind of logic. That's definitely, guys and ladies, you want to avoid something, avoid that. That's really bad. Don't do it. Definitely not good. And the last one's belittling, talking down to each other. This is one that's hard to watch when you see husbands or wives doing this to each other. When they're, I think Dave talked about it a lot, how if you don't want your husband or wife to act like a child, don't treat them like they're one.
Yeah.
You know, and it's amazing how many spouses treat their spouse as though they're idiots. And then they wonder why they withdraw from conversations, or they wonder why they would rather just sit in silence as opposed to carry on a conversation at the end of the day. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, what are you, belittling is never good in any situation. Like, I know from seeing you do youth ministry, you don't belittle your students. Even in
No.
children's ministry, you didn't belittle the children.
No.
What do you think belittling accomplishes?
Nothing. It just makes the person feel smaller than they actually are, or they feel like they can never complete or accomplish the task that was in front of them, whether that's communicating or whether that's making the right decision. If somebody makes a poor decision, lapse of judgment, and you belittle them, it's going to make them feel like they can never be successful in that situation again. And when I liked what you said about the acting like a child or treating your spouse like a child, because
Well, I don't want
withdrawing.
to take credit for that. That was Dave. I
Oh,
was just
yeah.
quoting Dave. So Dave, we'll give him the credit for that. That was his thing.
So withdrawing, the escalation, and belittling are all things that children do. So if you go into a preschool and you see kids, like when they start to get frustrated, how they communicate with each other, they withdraw, they escalate, and they belittle each other, and they're acting like kids. So it's funny that's not funny, but adults, when they turn 18, 19, 20, or they could even be 60 years old, still struggle with things that they did in preschool when they started interacting with other kids.
Yeah, it's people are people.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. Just because you are of age to be an adult doesn't mean you necessarily act like one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And treating someone as though they're not an adult will only continue to encourage that kind of acting. Uh, when our kids got to a certain age, we got rid of the cribs and they're in toddler beds.
Yep.
And this summer, we're probably going to move our daughter out of a toddler bed into a regular bed.
Yeah.
Because as she gets older and as she matures, she's going to get new responsibilities and she's going to
Yeah.
get new things that are going to be opened up to her.
Yeah.
And in marriage, there should never be this graduation of you're an immature husband or wife, and I will you're married, you're adults.
Yeah.
Like, have respect. Like, I think that's a lot of it. I think respect is huge in this because it just seems like there are a lot of couples who really struggle with respect for each other.
Mhm.
And I think the society we live in today doesn't believe in grace too much either. So, in Philippians 2 verses 3 through 4, he says, "Value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." And I bring that up because I wanna make a statement, and this was not in Dave's sermon. This is my statement, and I hope everybody understands this. It's a reality check. No one really understands where you're coming from except you. Period. I don't care how long you've been married. Just because you're thinking it doesn't mean your spouse knows you're thinking it. And just because you mean well doesn't always mean your spouse knows you mean well. Because we don't know where they're coming from that day. They may have had a hard day at work. They may have had a terrible day with the kids. They may have had the best day ever. And that will shape what they hear. That will shape how they experience what you're trying to communicate. You can't assume that people know where you're coming from. Am I wrong in saying that, Rob?
No, you're right. If you're just getting, it's like whenever I learned this in children's ministry. Whenever like 2 and 3-year-olds, they don't know how to communicate why they're hurt, why they're frustrated, they're just crying. And eventually, they get to the point where they forget like why. Like they're just so overwhelmed, and you're like, "Why? What?" And finally, whenever they communicate why they're frustrated, they're like, "I don't know." And then we never solve the issue.
Yeah.
And eventually, people, I think, will get past the fact that they're frustrated about something little, and they forget why they were frustrated, and then they just become angry.
Mhm.
When in reality, if they just communicated why they're frustrated in the first place, like you were talking about, it could have been solved immediately. I see this in churches a lot, where the reason that they do something is because they've always done it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they forgot like why they did it in the first place. It seems that when we're frustrated or trying to communicate that a certain way, we use that same logic for some reason of, well, we're going to do this because we've always done it, but there probably was something behind it on why they were doing it in the first place.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is just, again, comes back to communication. We've been
Yeah.
talking about this whole time, and I think that's really what this whole thing is about is communication. So, I'm gonna throw the question out: how many times has your spouse's reaction to something confused you? Julio posted something in here. Let me bring this up. He said it can be a spiral. What I mean about that is Jess has been a single mom and very independent. We're married now, obviously, but at times it has me questioning, am I being a child or is it something else she's experiencing? Because at times I'm thrown into the kids mix. LOL. And she knows I'm posting. Yes, she knows I'm posting. So he must be there with her right now. But you just there are times in marriage where you just have to remember, just because they know me doesn't mean they have a readout of what's going on inside my brain.
Yeah.
And that comes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's that thing of uh, be honest, get to the point, and love each other. Like, just
Yeah.
say it how it is with love. Don't say it how it is and beat them down. Just say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is where I'm at. This is what's going on inside my head. Am I wrong about this? And I'll be honest, when I get frustrated, the best thing that I try to do, and I'm not always the best at this because I'm just like anybody else, is I always try to end it with the question of, am I wrong? Because there's a good, strong chance that I am, because I'm not infallible. I make mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you go into any kind of an argument with the mindset that you are 100%, no doubts about it, no questions asked, the right person, you're going to have a tough time in marriage,
Yep.
because you're going to get basically put on your butt so many times, you're not going to know how to handle it,
Yeah.
because you will be wrong.
Yeah.
You're going to
Yeah.
make mistakes.
I think the
Maybe,
biggest downfall in this is what we talked about earlier, where you have an answer before the person finishes. I think the biggest, whenever confusion happens the most between me and my wife, is somebody already has an answer, or there's a cutoff of communication. So I'll get through half of what I really want to say, or she'll get through half of what she really wants to say, and I'll kind of butt in because I think she's done, instead of listening all the way through. Because if I listened all the way through, probably all the questions that I had or the frustration that I had probably would have went away. And I think that's the biggest confusion mark in our relationship, is sometimes we're just not patient with the other person.
I would agree with you 100% on that. I would even say, if you're in that situation where you're thinking about your rebuttal, so to speak, uh, if you're doing that, the chances of you actually being able to repeat what they just said to you are very slim, because you're not hearing any of it. I mean, you're hearing words and you're hearing sounds come out of their vocal cords,
Yes.
and you know that they're saying something, but I guarantee you can't remember
Yeah.
anything they said, because you weren't really listening.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. They
my
call
dad
that
used to get on
active
me for
listening.
that. Yeah, my dad used to get on me for that all the time. He would just be like, "Listen first, think second," you
Yeah.
know? And that's so true. Just listen. It's amazing if we just stop and listen, hear what's being said to us, then think about it. I think your spouse would really appreciate if you would listen all the way through and just take a second and think about what they just said and then respond. A whole
Yes.
lot better than the moment they stop saying that last word, you've got something to say.
Yeah.
I think that would be huge. Julio says, to be honest, it's been a lot better the last few weeks. It's too good to be true. It's too good to be true. She always says I'm overthinking, and she's not wrong. Yeah, there's a lot of us guys, like, we
Yep.
really do try to be logical with everything,
Yep.
and we are problem fixers and problem solvers, and we want to make sure everything works right.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
sometimes in the midst of that, we are very cold natured
Yep.
in
And
some ways.
when you overthink, you're assuming,
Yeah.
and don't assume, because
Yeah.
you'll be miserable.
Yeah, Julio also said, my previous marriage, I thought it was all cool. Then boom, it wasn't a marriage. So I'm pretty sure I'm overthinking.
That
So,
was good.
So I want to get into some ways that Dave said to argue without destroying your marriage. And the very first thing he said was take no offense when none is intended. And 95% of the time, none is intended.
Yeah.
What do you think it is, Rob, that causes people to be offended?
I think it goes with the last thing. They're confused. Like they don't fully understand what the person was trying to say. And sometimes people explain things very poorly. I've done that
True.
many times. Like
Same here.
especially, and we'll talk about this a little bit, especially if you're not communicating face to face, like over text message, or you see a Facebook comment. Like most of the time, no offense was meant to be had. Like they didn't want to make you mad whenever they said that. And I know that I've done this with my wife. I've said something and I didn't explain it well, and then it escalated and I had to backtrack. And then I'm confused because I don't understand why we got to this situation in the first place. And then it becomes the vicious cycle.
I think you're right. I know with Rhea and she knows I'm just blunt. Like she knows that. And while I know she knows that, I try not to take that for granted. And so like today, we had dinner last night and we had food left over, and that was going to be our lunches today.
Yeah.
And we're like a lot of people. We're trying to save money right now. We're trying not to spend money on things.
Yeah.
And I sent Rhea a text and I just said, you forgot your lunch. And then I put the meh face on it. I put the meh face on after I typed the text so she would understand I'm not upset. I'm just telling you forgot your lunch.
Yep.
Because I really want to be conscious of the fact that short sentences, although to the point and really should be considered pretty harmless, can be taken as extremely cold.
Yeah.
And so there has to be some kind of understanding on your part as the other member of this duo, of this team, as we were talking about before, that understands it. Okay, I'm a short person and I am short in height, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm a short person. If you text me, I'm probably going to just text you matter of fact, here's the answer. If you ask me a question, I'm just going to give you the answer. I don't want to take my whole day and explain the answer if I don't have to.
Yeah. I know.
So when I do that, I have to understand that the other person, that may not be the way they communicate. And if that's not how they communicate, then I need to make sure I do something to let them know no offense is meant by this. So the next thing he talks about, approach how you want to be responded to. I love this one.
Yes.
I think 99.9% of arguments would cease if we did this.
Yes.
I very rarely find myself offended by my wife. And honestly, like I said, we don't argue much. But typically, if we do argue, it's because one of us approached the other the wrong way. It's not because there's anything actually even wrong. It's just there was a bad approach.
Yes.
And that bad approach caused all the issues.
Yes. Ours is mostly the approach in understanding the atmosphere around you.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I had a long, tough day and I come home and I did something stupid, and then my wife knows I'm frustrated and brings it up, I'm probably not going to react the same way that I would if I was having a great day.
Right.
So you have to really, and I think that's a big, like, if I'm getting ahead of myself, let me know. But what I've seen, especially in our relationship and what I've seen others, most of the time they're getting frustrated, not because of the initial conversation, but because of something else that's going on in their life. So it's like, rough day at work, you stubbed your toe, the Buckeyes lost the national championship, like stuff like that, like,
Right.
the Wildcats lost, like you don't want to bring up if they're a huge UK fan and they're not in the top 25.
I know.
You
Isn't
don't
that a
want
shame that they're not even ranked right now? It's a shame. So,
But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I
you
get
need
what
to
you're saying.
understand the person and where they are too, because you might not get the response that you want, or come to the conclusion that you want just based on what's going on in that person's life at that moment, which is unfortunate because you would think like, well, they should be able to throw off that. We should have a civil conversation about what's happening here and now, but we're not perfect. We have emotion that's always flowing through us. Both guys and girls go through that.
Yes. Rob, you were a golf coach for a while.
Yeah.
Explain an approach
Girls
shot.
golf coach at that.
Yeah. Well, explain an approach shot to me.
An approach shot. So an approach shot is anything. Well, for most people, it's about 150 yards and in. And it's a thing that you're approaching the green in that. And there's specific clubs that you would use as an approach. Wedges is what they're called. And you're doing it to set yourself up for an easy finish.
That's why I wanted to bring that up.
Yes.
Because in golf, if you are incredible with your approach shot, you're probably shaving strokes off your score, and you probably got a better chance of placing really high in tournaments.
Yes.
Guys who can knock the skin off the ball when they hit it, if they have a horrible approach shot, they're not going to do well.
Correct.
And approach is everything. And when you're approaching your spouse in a conversation, you're going to set up one of two things: a positive conversation or a negative conversation.
Correct.
And so it's so important that the approach shot is done well. And so if I can say anything to everybody listening, understand how you approach a conversation may be more important than the conversation itself, because if the approach is bad, your spouse may not hear a word you say.
Yep. Yeah.
It's that simple. And you want to make sure that when you're in a conversation, that approach is everything. And like I said, these other things are great, but I think you could bring up the approach in every one of these other things.
Yeah.
So I really believe that the approach, the way you approach the conversation, is what's going to impact that conversation the absolute most. So
I think if you go with the approach, and on the other side, if you're being approached by something, assuming the best, if you just do those two things, depending on, so if you're receiving something, assume the best. And if you're going to somebody, make sure you think about the approach. If we get both of those, there's going to be a lot of grace on both sides, and there'll be a lot more healthy conversations.
Yeah. Daryl Jordan says it best: you can be right, but wrong at the top of your voice.
Ooh, I like that.
That's really good.
That's a good one.
That's really good. And if you want to talk to somebody who has a good marriage, Daryl's one of those guys. Yes. Fantastic marriage. Him and Misty are a great example of a very healthy marriage. Next one, always argue in person. This is so true, man. Like, if we have not learned by now from Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and what in the world does arguing through typing accomplish?
Nothing. Makes your thumbs tired.
Makes your thumbs tired. I was gonna say keyboard warriors, man. They it doesn't accomplish anything. I've never been on a conversation with somebody on Facebook where they've insulted me, called me names, told me I was the stepson of a stepson of a stepson of a redheaded stepchild, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? After you insulting me for the past 20 minutes, I now agree with you. Like, that doesn't work. Like, the other thing is, there is something to be said for facial expression and voice inflection.
Yep.
That's why not just argue. Don't argue on FaceTime. Don't argue on a phone call. If you're going to have an argument, argue face to face.
Yeah.
Be brave. Don't be a coward. A coward's way to argue is through text messages, through FaceTime, through Facebook. That is a coward's way to argue. And if you're going to be a coward in your marriage, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Period. You're just in
Not gonna
trouble.
go well.
You can't be a coward when it comes to your marriage. Marriage is one of the most brave things you will ever do in your life, because it means you're putting your life in somebody else's hands and you're trusting that they're putting their life in your hands.
Yeah.
If you can't be brave enough to have hard conversations, then you're not ready to be married.
Correct.
That's just my opinion. What do you think about this whole arguing in person?
Yeah, well, immediately, this is just the way my mind works, is like if I ever get into an argument on Facebook, I'm smiling like the whole time, because I can't be, I know it's not going to go anywhere. So I just start smiling and I'm typing. And if the other person gets frustrated, I normally don't do it because I don't want other people to get frustrated without, like, there's not going to be a conclusion to it. But if I ever get in those moods where I'm just going to disagree with this person just to see what happens. If I do that to you, if you're watching and I disagree with you on your Facebook comment, I'm doing it with a smile on my face. I'm not doing it angrily. But it's true. Like the most, this is not something that Kaylee and I struggle with, because we don't argue over text messages anymore. Maybe when we were younger, and maybe high school, early college, it seemed like everything was okay, and then you get a text message. Maybe we did that a few times, but definitely, if I have a sense that she's frustrated about something, I'll call her.
Yeah.
Or I'll say, well, we can talk about this when we get home, and I stop the continuing of conversation on that subject. And she does the same for me. She'll realize that I'm frustrated, but I normally don't get frustrated in our relationship. We don't get frustrated. The sense of our frustration is never about each other. There's always an outside source, it seems like.
Right. Right. Well, I think that goes into the next thing a little bit too, is know what doesn't need to be said.
Yes.
We touched on this a little bit earlier. The two things you never need to say is you always or you never.
Yeah.
Just avoid those statements like the plague, because that's what they are to a marriage. They're cancer.
Yes.
They are a cancer, and it's not healthy to even engage in that kind of a conversation. So some other things, and I want to throw this up here on the screen too, and I think we talked about this a little bit beforehand before we got live, but leave the past in the past. To continually drum up, well, you did this. Do you remember when you did this? Do you remember when you did that? Man, you just got to be wanting there to be problems to do that.
Yeah.
Julio posted something real quick. He said, last thing, I talk softly when arguing. That itself comes across as being condescending.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
That's true.
Yeah, true story. But I think I see a lot of couples where either the husband or the wife, they always want to bring up old news.
Yeah.
They want to bring up, well, remember when you did this? Or, well, what about when you did that? And it's like, but that was then.
Yeah.
That's not now. Why do you think that seems to be a go-to for so many people?
It's just the cut to the heart. At that point, if you do that, you really want to hurt the person. I'm convinced of it. Like you're not at that point, you're not trying to solve anything. It's I want to win. I want to make sure that I am bigger than that person in my mind. And I think that's the whole point of it. I don't think that anybody's trying to come to a conclusion with anything. Unless you're just trying to break that person completely. But bringing up the same thing over and over again, because most people, I try to think the best. I hope I try to think the best in people. If somebody does something silly or dumb, they're probably beating themselves up a lot more than you could ever do to them.
Yep.
And when you're in a marriage, you need to be each other's cheerleaders. And whenever you're cheering somebody on, you never say, you did a great job, but you sucked that one time, but you're still doing a good job. Like, you don't say that. Like, you continue to just state the positive things and look forward.
Yeah, Daryl Jordan says from a book he read, if you don't let your past die, then it won't let you live.
Yeah.
100% agree. 100% agree. And then April Price said they just want to win.
Yep.
And I think that's a big danger, which I think it really brings us to this last point. I think it's the most important thing we can talk about, and that's the problem is the enemy, not your spouse. Your spouse isn't the problem, isn't the enemy. The problem itself is the enemy. And the reason we say that is because we're on the same team.
Yep.
And I love the fact that April brought the idea of they want to win. There is no winning between the couple. The win only happens when you win together
Yep.
because you're on the same team. I'm a huge football fan. I've been a football fan I grew up in Ohio. And so growing up in Ohio, football is life. I worked at a job in high school where when Fridays came around, high schoolers did not have to work on Friday night as long as they promised to be at the football game. But if our owner and boss found out that we weren't at the football game, we would have to work every Friday because he expected us to be supporting our football team from our high school. And this is the area I grew up in. So football has always been something I've been big on. And always grew up a Cleveland Browns fan, an Ohio State fan, and this past couple weeks ago, my Cleveland Browns actually made the playoffs, Rob. And they made it to the second round of the playoffs. The Cleveland Browns, like
first
the
round,
Clowns. Right? Everybody called us the Cleveland Clowns for a long time, but they made it to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And the second game of the playoffs, we played against guys who are going to be in the Super Bowl this coming, in a couple weeks, the Kansas City Chiefs, and we lost to them.
Yeah.
And we had guys that scored touchdowns and we had guys that had big tackles. And if they'd have saw that and said, that's right, I did awesome, but your team still lost.
Yeah.
When you're in a marriage, it's not about individual accolades. It's about what are you doing together?
Yeah.
So when an argument happens, there is no winner.
Yeah.
The only winner is when you guys resolve it and both of you are the winner.
Correct.
You've got to have this mindset of same team. Rhea and I do this a lot. If one of us is correcting our kids for something, but the other one had already done it, and we try and stop them and say, hey, I already did that.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, and one of us gets upset. We just kind of look at each other and say, hey, same team. And it immediately calms both of us down because we realize this is why we're here. We do this together. Dave, I don't think it was this past week. It was the week before. He talked about the couples that are married and have separate bank accounts. And
that was last week. Yeah.
And who have, who really aren't married.
Yeah.
They're just cohabitating. It is really hard to be a team when you don't do anything together. Daryl says you win as a team or you lose as a team. 100% right. 100% right. Rob, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I mentioned this in a couple podcasts ago, but in my class, conflict and community, they had like a graph, and they said there's 3 different outcomes in everything. Oh, there's 4. So there's the win-win, there's the win-lose, the lose-win, or the lose-lose. And they said you should always fight your hardest to get that win-win. And a win-win doesn't mean that everybody gets what they both wanted, but you both come together to move forward together.
Mm-hmm.
They said sometimes there is a win-lose, but in all reality, that just a lot of the time ends up being a lose-lose, where nobody goes forward and both people are hurt, both parties are hurt. So you always need to figure out what's the win for the other person and what's going to be a win for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and resolution should always be the hope.
Mm-hmm.
Resolution should always be the hope. Now, is it going to resolve to what you wanted when you first started the conversation?
Probably not.
It's a good chance, probably not. But what's best for the conversation? What's best for the couple? What's going to be the outcome that's going to be the best for both of you? And I know. If you're married, that's how you should always be thinking. it should always be us, not me.
Mhm.
When you think me, good luck, because you may just be me after a few years, because you've me'd yourself out of a relationship.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
it has to be we. There can be no me. And so, good message this week, man. Tons to
It's
talk
good.
about. That flew
It's good.
by. You got anything else you want to add before we get ready to sign off here?
Yeah, the one thing we didn't talk about too much, mostly because we're doing a lot of practical things. But I liked what you said at the end, where it's we. But us on this podcast, we're ministers, we're Christians, and a lot of the time we do think of we, but that can still be selfish.
Mhm.
We need to think Him in most things. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily we, but it's about our Creator. And when you guys come, if you're in a marriage relationship and you come to a conclusion, always make sure that it aligns with the He as well, because that's when you'll find the most success in your relationship. That's my final comments on that one.
The cord of 3 strands is not easily broken.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you want to make it we, it probably needs to be us and he together.
Yes.
So thanks a lot, man, for doing this today. I'm going to
Yeah.
let you get off of here, and I'm going to make a few quick announcements, and then we'll log off. Thank you guys for spending your lunch with us. Real quick, just as a reminder, community group signups have started. You can sign up in person or online. Just make sure you contact David Kibler if you'd like more info for that. The Indestructible Marriage Ministry kickoff is Saturday, February 13th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Make sure if you want to be a part of that, you get signed up online at catalystchristian.net.com or .org. It doesn't matter. We own them all. Sign up at one of those. Just go to the event registrations in the top right-hand corner of the page. Appreciate you guys giving us your lunch hour and spending time chatting with us. Until next time, we will see you next week as we continue to talk about these amazing messages that Dave's been bringing to us on Sundays. God bless. Have a great week.